Over to you,
Okay.
Tom.
So I'll be very brief. One of the priorities, one of the 5 priorities on the Selectmen's work plan is to work very closely with the planning board and try to figure out ways that we can, in exercising the authority that we have on various issues, see if we can figure out ways to get traction on different aspects of the master plan. In particular, the board is very interested in how it can help in terms of creating additional vitality in the town center, and also how we can figure out a more comprehensive approach to addressing various parking issues and traffic issues that exist within the town. So with those items listed as our priorities, there have been a couple meetings that I've been able to attend with the planning board. We've sort of engaged each other on this. There's been additional sort of side meetings that have taken place with regards to some of the traffic issues. But we all thought that it would be a good idea to ask the planning board if they would come in and perhaps give us a quick overview of the master plan and talk to us about some of the other initiatives that relate to these priorities that we have that we very much want to work with you on. So.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Mr. Chairman, I'm Lance Grensbeck. I'm serving as the chair of the planning board. With me this evening are Betsy Krieger, Peter Van Aken, and Drew Bottero, whom I'm afraid you all know quite well. What we're going to do, we have, I think, 5 items on the, and there should be in a packet there. I won't spend a great deal of time on each one, but just give you an overview. The first piece I'm going to give you a short walkthrough is the sort of handout here that says it's labeled Master Plan Phase 1 Draft Report. I dragged Tom through a 40-page version of this. This is down to kind of a dozen pages. The next version, which unfortunately you'll miss, will be about 6 to 8 pages and even shorter, but things like that. And I think you're reasonably familiar with the general background. You know, the last master plan we did, this town did, was in 1953, and so what we're doing now is beginning a comprehensive look at what's going on in the town and where it's going. What we did in this phase 1 was focus on 4 issues: housing, neighborhoods, the town center, and economic development. There's still another half a dozen or so which are going to be start work on this summer: transportation, natural resources, a series of others. And I would emphasize that as we started this and as we go through it, what we're intending is not a detailed blueprint to sort of specify who does what, where, and when, but really sort of a set of strategic directions. And what we're going to be doing is sort of talking those directions as they sit today through with you and all the other boards over the next several months, with the idea that by September we will, compliance with Mass General Law, hold a public hearing, and then incorporating any changes we hear, then vote that as the first phase, and then begin to work on there. So do that. Just to, as you flip through, you flip to page 4, and one of the core messages that comes out of the material and work we looked at was that Winchester basically is quite substantially built out. They're not in color, but if these are just the maps, 1850, 1900, 1950, and 2005. And these are just residential buildings. If you were to add in commercial buildings in the downtown, you'd see it's pretty well developed. So basically, as a town, we're down to just a few acres that are undeveloped, and those are very difficult. I mean, the core message to take home from that is that what happens for the next 20 to 50 years is basically going to be redeveloping. There's very little open space. So a lot of the changes we're going to be making are going to be very hard because they're going to change the existing fabric of the town or be put on very marginal pieces of property. Population on page 5, slide 5, we're at about 23,000 today. The town's population is growing, but very slowly. But if you flip over, and there's a wonderful peak that happened in the late 60s and 70s, when about 40% of the town's population were school-age children. We're down to about 25% now, so not quite the same pressure. But the thing that's driving that population, slow, steady population increase, you can see on page 6, one of them is school enrollments. The school system is excellent. It's a magnet for families to come into the town, and so we're seeing a steady progression of people coming into town to take advantage of that, the educational excellence, and you can see that, steady growth right since 2000, and the school department numbers that are shown here are reflecting that growth through 2014 and beyond. The other pattern we're seeing on page 7 is the growth in the number of units of housing. This is just, if you count up all your single-family homes, your two families, apartments, and condominiums, what we're seeing is a growth in the number of housing units. It's actually faster than the growth in population. And flipping over to page 8, what we think that represents is the same pattern that's going on nationally. It's going on in Winchester, which is you're getting much smaller households. It's a more affluent society, social patterns have changed. So, grandmother and grandfather live in their own apartment, you live in your apartment, so on down. So everybody is looking for, individual housing in effect for themselves. So what we've been seeing is a pretty substantial housing pressure on the town. The combination of its location in the metropolitan area, good housing stock, good education, and things like that. You've been seeing this just constant pressure upwards, and I expect that what we're going to see is more of that. We have a respite now because of the recession. It's harder to organize money, but we're going to be a premium market within the Boston region and things like that. When we talk to people about what this meant on housing issues, what came out very clearly from the conversations were on page 9 there, that we've seen a very sharp increase in the price of housing. It's tempered a little bit in the last year, but I would expect that Winchester, relative to other towns, and certainly relative to the rest of the country, we're going to see fairly high housing prices, and they're going to continue to rise. What that's done, and we heard this repeatedly, is effectively close the Winchester housing market to young families. Unless you're very well-to-do or you have family money, it's very, very difficult to get a house here, even as when you're starting off and things like that. The other sort of problem we notice is that we only have about 1.9% of the 10% that's recommended for affordable housing on the state guidelines, and that is. You're talking about a family of 4 that's earning $66,000 to $91,000 a year. So it's not an inconsiderable amount of money. And if you're a teacher or a fireman or somebody like that, you're basically looking at being closed out of Winchester. Long term, that means we're going to have to pay more for people to come to Winchester, commute in, because we're going to be attracting them in. But the other sort of piece of that housing puzzle, as you look at it, is that you are at risk of losing discretionary grants, and you're certainly open to the provisions of Chapter 40B that allow developers to come in and say, you're well below the state's threshold, I'm going to develop a project in Winchester that meets those, and that allows them to override local zoning requirements. So those are core issues that are out there. I think that as we were discussing with Tom earlier today on another conversation, if you think about what consumed most of the board's time in the last couple, 3, 4, 5 years almost, some $14 million of the town's money, and a huge amount of sort of pro bono time put in by all of the rest of us in the community neighborhoods. It's basically the housing issue in the form of the Avalon Bay proposal. And that basically had a huge impact on, what our services and our schools. I would say that remains the critical issue for the town to deal with. Not probably in the next year or so, but I would say that within 3 to 5 years, I'd say you have at least a 50-50 chance of a developer coming in, an Avalon-style developer coming in and saying, Winchester housing market is ripe, you're not meeting the Chapter 40B requirements, I'm going to put a proposal in place. Now, pick your location, Bonnell's, Mahoney's, Stop and Shop, any other cluster of areas you could, where the market looks like an opportunity. And unfortunately, I think we're no better prepared than we were 5 or so years ago to deal with that from a pure point of town policy and zoning. So one of the core things that we heard repeatedly in our discussions across the town, and one of the things that the planning board took very seriously, was the fact that we need as a community to think through what it is we need to do about housing, particularly multifamily housing, because the demand is going to be there for developed apartments and condominiums. And so, what's our policy? How are we going to cite it? How are we going to manage that? And we will, next time, we may or may not have the opportunity to buy the property and control it ourselves. So this, I would say, is probably the single most important issue the town's going to deal with. And it's something we're going to basically be coming back to you to look for guidance and help you work through, because this probably will dwarf anything we'll do on either the town center or parking and its impact, potential financial impact on the town. So that sits as a sort of a first piece. The recommendations are there, but we'll lay those out for you in detail at some other time. The other piece we heard very clearly was that, because you're redeveloping Winchester, you really are talking about changing the neighborhoods. And the core of Winchester's value to many people is the neighborhoods and the density and the quality of those neighborhoods. They're being, in some cases, changed wholesale, other changes piece by piece. We heard a lot about the problems of seeing very large sort of new houses introduced to, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very large houses being introduced in neighborhoods that now have small houses. The effect is sort of disconcerting for a lot of people. Yes, it's a good, renewal of the housing stock, but it changes the fabric of the neighborhood. And what people asked for was basically ways to manage the transformation of neighborhoods more effectively than we do today. So that means going back and looking at what constitutes the core qualities of a neighborhood. How do we change our zoning, which is basically set back in the 30s? How do we make it much more responsive to what goes on in the neighborhoods? And then how do we manage the process of development in those neighborhoods? I mean, is it always a fight, before the ZBA or somebody else? Is there a better way of doing that? So those two, the housing and the neighborhoods, are probably very tightly locked in, have very much to do with the quality and the value of housing, and therefore the kind of money we drive. The next two pieces, and I would probably reverse them in the order than what we presented here, but the other two issues are really closely locked, which is economic development. As you're painfully aware, I'm sure, we depend extremely heavily on residential property tax here. You can go back through the numbers, but basically, property taxes are, I still think today, 70% or more of our total revenues. Mel can correct me, but, and of that, property revenues, almost all of it comes from residential properties, and of that, almost all of it comes from well, not all of it, but most of it comes from single-family houses. So we're basically very tightly locked in to funding all our services based on what we tax people directly. There's very little else. So, yes, you could say, well, yes, if Winchester needs more services, why don't we simply sort of go out and raise the property tax, through overrides? But I think that when we looked very closely at the distribution of incomes across the town, yes, there are a very large number of people in the town who are wealthy, but, a good chunk of, about a quarter of the town's households have incomes under $50,000, and it sort of goes down from there. So unless we really want to displace those people and make it an even more economically stratified community, we really need to figure out a way to maintain services without just letting the market push everybody out of town that doesn't have an income of several million a year. So in the economic development side of it, we really sort of focused on what can the town begin to do about looking for economic development opportunities proactively, rather than just waiting for businesses to sort of fall in hand. We can do, and that led us, I think, very early on to sort of say, we need to look at the town center. It is obviously the core core retail center, but it's also a location for a huge number of businesses. Betsy Ware, our town planner, and Peg Behringer, the sort of economic development consultant, have been doing an inventory who's out there, and it's quite staggering. But that's a major economic engine. We need to take a very close look at that, and so as we've been talking with Tom, that's one of the sort of core issues. And there's a series of recommendations here on page 14 that I think we'll get into a little bit later in the discussion. So the core messages coming out of the first phase of the master plan are that, we're seeing slow, steady growth in a town that's very much built out, so redevelopment and all the pressures of that are going to be paramount and come back to your table and ours constantly. How we deal with housing is going to have a huge impact on schools and on neighborhoods. We need to deal with that early. But if we're going to sort of manage our way out and financially, we need to take a very, very close look at economic development needs, and starting with the town center seemed to be a sort of a good point for leverage this. The other couple handouts I have for you are just sort of parallel some of the work you did. You put together your own work plan priorities. We have done the same. There's a handout here that says Winchester Planning Board 2009-2010 work plan priorities. So there's a list there. Unless you have questions, I'm simply going to leave that with you. Many of them parallel the sorts of issues you have been discussing on your own sort of work plan. And certainly the town center parking initiative, issues like that are quite in our sort of the top of our list. The other sort of issue that we dealt with this last fall was dealing with the zoning bylaws. We put in place, with your support at the fall town meeting, a recodification of the zoning bylaws, which were just basically renumbering, reorganizing, and doing general house cleaning. In the process of that, Peter and Drew, who sort of worked through that process, we met several times with the ZBA and other groups. We identified a very long laundry list of things that needed to be changed. Some of them were simple as cleaning up definitions. Others were sort of taking care of things. For example, we have Conservation Commission pointed out to us, for example, that we have no provisions in the existing zoning bylaw to deal with the solar panels or wind turbines or any beyond cell towers. Your favorite, Tom, I know. So there's a long laundry list of here. We made a first stab a couple of weeks ago at sort of saying what we thought were the critical path items for zoning bylaw revisions in terms of sort of getting work done on them. What we're going to do in the next couple of weeks is come back to other groups and ask what their priorities are. We expect that there'll be some of these we can do quickly enough to get on the fall warrant and sort of move forward, but some of them are going to be a bit more complex. So I think we're going to look at perhaps at 2 or 3 sessions of town meeting to bring all of these up to date. So there will be opportunities in there to both clean up a lot of the problems that we're dealing with in the neighborhoods and development, as well as sort of bring it up to current standards. But there are projects like the downtown where we're going to want to do a much more comprehensive look at the kind of zoning we have and bring that back to town meeting at some point there. So those are sort of information pieces. I think we'd like to take Tom up on his suggestion in our informal meetings about perhaps laying out some sort of future meetings with you folks, maybe a little earlier in the evening over the library where the lights shut off at 9 so we get to go home at some point. But we'd like to take some of these issues and break them down into more detail that's not appropriate tonight. But Tom had asked specifically, could we give you a sense of our thinking and where we're beginning to go on both the town center and the parking? So the last 2 pieces deal with those handouts, and we volunteered Peter and the rest of my colleagues to sort of walk you through, not the details of that tonight, but at least some sense of what we've been hearing from people, how we're walking through it, and where we're going with it.
So that was very helpful. Thank you very much. And again, I think, this is an opportunity at this meeting, given that overview, to sort of bring all of us up to speed just a little bit in terms of context for our thinking on then as we drill down into some of the specific issues. And I think if we keep the conversation going, that will reinforce itself. I think it'll be good.
Thank you. I would, before we leave zoning, merely note 2 things, that these things need a long lead time very frequently. And my understanding is that there is still interest at this table in revisiting the public parking bylaw, which was not taken forward last time. And I keep hearing something about cell towers, but have no idea what it is. I think we challenge this board to get involved with us, and to get involved with us quickly in order that we arrive at September the 17th, I believe, is the cutoff on the warrant. You have a very short time window to deal with it. And if you're doing meets and bounds or anything like that, that's got to be defined by the time you publish your warrant. So this is not something you can leave until the end of the summer, in my opinion, with any success of getting it on the town meeting floor. In terms of the parking, there's a whole bunch of things going on. Next Monday at 7:30, the planning board is hosting a session at which we will receive the report of the people, the consultant that's been doing the downtown planning initiative, and get a much better understanding of the building, of the inventory of activity, both residential and commercial, that has been put together by Betsy Ware and the consultant, and also issues like the catchment area, what area of the world, how far do you have to go to support a restaurant, for example, as opposed to a hair salon. Obviously, they're not the same catchment areas. And some other thoughts like this.
What was that date again? I'm sorry.
That will be
Next
Monday,
Monday.
a week from tonight, knowing that you don't have a meeting planned. We thought we'd take advantage
This
of that.
meeting might still be going. but-
Well, so
You're
be
welcome
it.
to adjourn, just bring dinner
You
with
can,
you.
you can adjourn.
We'll
At
adjourn to join you.
7:30.
Okay.
And the location will be noted. At the same time, Larry Bluestone has been doing a study downtown, which we've alluded to a number of times, which looks at some sites, looks at the constraints on those sites, and looks at some what-if scenarios as to what one might do. And in particular, the Waterfield lot, he's coming in with two different plans, one residential and one just parking. He's looked at the laundry building site, so-called, in terms of the development there. That is a tough site because it's right up against the river, right in the floodplain, right in the 200-year setback. And we also looked at the Jenks lot and what might happen over there in terms of modification of what's there. We did not proceed with some other sites. We ran out of funding and time, but those will be brought forward by Larry and for the discussion. Both of these obviously are going to come back to
Peter, when is Larry, when will he present his stuff?
after the downtown grant.
Next Monday?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
next
they're
Monday.
both on Monday,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
It's our intention to do both of them. But that's just the introduction.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we need to digest it. For most of us, it'll be the first time we see the downtown initiative study. And Larry's is beginning to come out now. But it's clear that these are useful in understanding our downtown. We intend to share it broadly, and hopefully it will be helpful in driving decisions and structure and so forth. So that's sort of the update on that. In terms of other initiatives, Selectman Berman and I and Betsy Ware attended a parking strategy meeting in Arlington that was absolutely first rate. It was a real mind stretcher. It had a lot of information about what's happening in other places. There's a large document we're trying to get in a more readable format that we can share. There was a consultant who clearly was very knowledgeable and whose database goes from Palo Alto to Reading, Mass. The Reading, Mass study was very interesting and very important to us because Reading, Mass was convinced they needed a parking garage because they didn't have enough parking. The first thing that happened was they went out and they did an exhaustive on-street survey, hour by hour, in terms of where is the parking, how is it being used, private and public. And the conclusion was you don't need a new parking garage. You need to be able to control by fees or stickers or whatever what you have now. And I would not be in the least bit surprised if that might have some applicability in Winchester. So we are going to urge this board and ourselves to plan to mount that kind of study. Unfortunately, it isn't going to work in the summer because it's obviously not a good time. But as we get into the fall, I think collection of that data will go a long way. A number of us have sat in meetings with people and have collected a great deal of anecdotal information, some of which is limited by what they can see out their own door. It's all well-meaning, and I'm not saying it's inaccurate, but I think it may not, in fact, look around the corner as to what's going on the next street, and I think that's pretty vital. Notwithstanding that, the Bluestone study offers us some alternatives if we in fact wished to proceed that way. But this seminar we went to cautions us that the cost of building parking structures is very high. The cost of fully amortizing them is strikingly large. Lowell put up a 400-car garage at a cost of $24,000. They're sort of the cheapest
Per space.
Per space, yeah, $24,000 per space. Sort of the cheapest in the whole list. And that would require about a $7 an hour fee of income on a steady basis to amortize it, to break even. And obviously, if you put more money into it, even more. So it's a cautionary tale. And we will try to get this report and make it available. It is
That'd be great.
heavy reading, but it is, I think, very much along the lines of, well, I hadn't thought of that. And some things wouldn't work here, but some things have already started discussion. And we've heard about the question of appropriate fees in some of our lots, having appropriate hardware, appropriate ways of dealing. I know that Wedgmere is on the table in terms of what might happen there. It's got to be part of the entire picture. We did note and that we do not feel we have a very adequate way of dealing with parking. We don't have a sort of policy group. Most of the parking issues land right on this table, and usually one at a time, and usually on the crisis basis. It's a one-way street, it's a curb cut, it's somebody is unhappy about the parking fees or something like that. We would urge all of us to come up with a scheme that has a continual review and a continual input and provides the Board of Selectmen with appropriate policy on an ongoing basis. We've suggested and endorsed the plans that have been mentioned about a parking advisory committee. It's got to be broader, though, than just a narrow subset of interested parties, such as the merchants. They're important. The owners are important. But there are other players in here that are equally important, like commuters from Winchester and people wanting to come and buy retail goods and so forth. So we urge that that initiative move forward. Another initiative in terms of downtown is that we have no essential person working on economic development. At one time, there was a model in which there was a person that had that title. That is not currently an active position, but right now it is done really only in a reactive form. Somebody will walk in and say, well, I'm kind of interested in developing this site, or something like that, but nowhere is there somebody banging on the door and says what Winchester really needs is the following kind of business, and get out to speak to trade groups or trade shows or advertise or whatever to say we really need a pub, or we really need a bicycle repair shop or something. I don't know what. But we don't have anybody doing that. It falls to sort of all of us in an ad hoc fashion, and the results show the ad hoc nature of what we're doing. So we think this is a very important concept that we believe. There are other aspects that are mentioned in the plan. I don't, and there's a whole page in here called the Town Center Initiative that talks about things that are important in the town center. The key thing, I think, from the planning board's point of view is an introduction of the concept of vibrancy. And for us, I think that means a mix of residential and more intense commercial and retail development. It's going to happen. The question is it going to happen under rules and in a context that we collectively define, or is it going to be simply reacting to someone that's walked in and put two parcels of land together and now wants to build what they want to build without our direction or guidance or concern?
Our process on this, which is, this meeting next Monday is a piece of it, has been to do a scan. And we started that with the master plan discussions, and we pinpointed a few areas. Parking was obviously one of them. There's a question of what kind of businesses do we have? Do we have the right mix? You know, are they attracting? Do we have the anchors that we need? We got the state grant to begin to do some information on that. Larry Bluestone's looking at sort of some development sites, and we've had another couple other pieces put together. The list on the page is basically sort of a quick once around that sort of list of things we need to look at. Some of these, like the riverway and the flood control, are something I think you and we are very familiar with. So our intent would be basically starting on the 29th, and maybe it's going to take another discussion after that, but to listen to what we already know and listen to the problems. And then I think it's our intent to put together at least a straw man work plan for dealing with the downtown. I think, I don't know, Brian, you'd asked me perhaps, or Roger earlier, what can the Board of Selectmen do to support the downtown initiative? And I think at the time we said we don't really know yet. So what we're hoping to do, and I would say perhaps by mid-July, is come back with it begins a work plan to say, we need the following kinds of pieces filled in. Here's what we have, here's what we're missing, we need more information on these. Here's the kind of skills or the kind of survey work or the kind of consultants we need, and bring that back for a discussion and see, where we have opportunities to fund it, where we can chase state monies to do those pieces. But that would be the point where I think we sort of try to gel the sense of what it is we need to tackle, because I think that one of the things we've heard, and I've certainly seen, is you can't deal with just one of these pieces. You can't deal with just the riverway and forget access to the area and how buildings are going to be developed. You can't do parking and forget, what the economic mix is going to be. So we're going to have to pull these pieces together, and I think that's the opportunity that, Tom and Brian, you've been talking about, for us to sort of, in effect, join forces with the Conservation Commission and others to tackle this as a group. If you look around our competition, there's other larger cities that have downtowns that are pretty well organized in making that going, and we're basically competing against the malls. Central management, central ownership. They basically sort of go out and study the market very carefully. They change their rules of zoning, they change their business rules to make sure that it is vital. We really don't have that kind of centralized control, but I think in order to make Winchester Center work, we're going to have to basically invent a process of governance of development to sort of get there faster than we would just letting it go sort of ad hoc. Because I think the one thing Peter organized a roundtable with the downtown interests about a year ago as part of the master plan. And the one question we said, well, hi, we're here from the town government to help you. Do you really want any help on this? And the answer came back pretty strongly, yes. That the zoning, the business ownership, the kind of size of the businesses didn't lend themselves to individual people, taking the initiative and doing everything themselves. They really needed to work at it as a group and saw the town and the planning board and the Board of Selectmen as sort of natural partners to help them crystallize and move something. So that's at least our intent, sort of scan it, start that on Monday. You're welcome to join us in discussing that. And then sort of by mid-July, as we can, outline a work plan and come back to you and others and talk about how we can advance it. So that's the core of that issue.
Anything else from you guys?
Questions?
Well, I would say, I think what we can do to assist is sort of advocate a sort of patient and systematic process, because I think the idea of sometimes expediency or proposing a solution before we have the data and the analysis, i.e. a parking garage, as opposed to realizing it's really inventory or supply management of the spaces, that's really the bottleneck, can cause us to make the wrong decision. So I think going about it the way you're doing in a holistic fashion, but making sure the objective information is there to support the direction that we need to go in.
Yeah, and I would endorse that. I think that, we sort of have a sense of urgency about getting some things done, but on the other hand, I'm a big believer in when we're approaching the town center, we're approaching parking, that we do it in a comprehensive way, and that we build it, that we build the strategy based on good data and information. And so I think a lot of the kind of anecdotal information we get, it's interesting, it's kind of informative in a lot of ways, but the idea of doing a comprehensive survey, which would not only perhaps give us some guidance, but would provide a kind of foundation and perhaps a legitimacy for any recommendations that would then come out of it, I think will be important to actually getting things done. So I think the process you're describing, the meeting on Monday, the further meeting perhaps in July, and then start to identify some ways in which we can engage in terms of providing the support for that foundational information, I think would be good.
Jimmy?
I think it's going to be an interesting summer. I think that we've all have our vision of Winchester Center. We have the actual vision. We actually have Winchester Center. We have a vision. I think I'm going to welcome the meeting of the minds and see what happens. I'm very interested to see what this Jinx lot will look like in 15, 20 years from now. And I have my own vision of it, and I just want to see if anybody else has it.
And Jim will be in his 15th term at that.
Yeah.
So it'll be-
You better be nice, that Jim. Roger?
We're thinking of mixed-use housing, perhaps it'll be a penthouse on the top and
We're
just commute
thinking,
across the street to work.
we're thinking artificial turf and scoreboards, actually.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be proactive rather than reactive. And given what we've done in the past, we've been very fortunate when we react. But it's going to catch us someday.
Roger?
Well, just in the interest of time, thank you to all of you for the work you've put in, and Peter's excellent summation of the parking seminar, and Tom's, I think, has said it well in terms of trying our two groups to maintain on some items and create on others some traction on this, and we ought to use that drop-dead date of the warrant article for September on any issues we can bring forward, but certainly on the parking one, to find the resources to do that study earlier versus later, so we at least, if we're going to have differences of opinions, it's based on a fact set we can agree on. So thank you very much.
I just have one comment, and Peter, I'd like to address it to you, is I think the two most important things are the, where do you start first? You got all these initiatives and time. Peter, you brought up the fact about time. I think the downtown community activity and the economic development, in my eyes, when I look down at this list, if you had to, start from the inner circle and work out, those are the two places. And I would like to know your guys' comment on that. Do you feel strongly about those two initiatives, or do you start them all at once? And what's your
Which two, Brian?
the first two you have under your Winchester Planning Board, the Town Center Initiative, Downtown Community Initiative, and the Economic Development Initiative. Are those prioritized? In my mind, they look like the two most important.
Actually, I think we have in some de facto prioritized them by moving ahead in a number of them already.
Good.
And you have as well.
I know.
Like the farmers market and so forth. So I think that we are marching pretty much to the same music on this one, which I think is good. It will take a while. It's clear that running in and suddenly changing the parking spaces per square foot is not the place you start unless you want to end up with unintended consequences problem of, I suspect, an interesting magnitude. We should learn from that, the past history, that we need to think carefully about what some of the spin-offs are and results of changing zoning, which may look great on the surface.
Fall will be upon us on
Yeah.
September 17th. Do you feel, Lance and I working together on a schedule of meetings between the two boards, are you talking monthly? Are you talking one or two initiatives for fall town meeting?
We'd meet every 2 weeks, except some of my colleagues apparently are insisting on taking vacations over the summer, so we'll have to sit down with a set of...
Town manager has canceled all vacations.
That's good, yeah. No, but I would...
That's only for paid employees.
I guess, Brian, more generally to your question about those two, I think yes. I mean, I think what the economic consultant will tell us next week is that we have a fairly small core business area.
Right.
That draws basically on the town and a little bit further. And that as a result, it's sort of fragile in the sense that, you're not looking at businesses that are going to survive, huge changes. So I think it's going to be very, very critical for us to, understand the mix of businesses that work there and what we could do, but I think also to work very, very closely with that community to figure out how they can change. Because I think if you have a very small business and you're in the middle of a recession and you're don't have a very big market area, you don't have a kind of business that draws people from, from New York or as far away, you really have to be very careful about thinking about how you're investing and how you're changing. You don't want to blow your market with a set of bad decisions. So I think in the sense of building a downtown community, listening early, listening often, and sort of walking through with them, looking at all these sets of pieces, how do these pieces fit together to work today? And if we're going to change them, make sure we don't pull the wrong piece out from underneath people. So in that sense, I think we'd very much agree with you that, getting the community organized and thinking about what makes it work as a business center, commercial center, is going to be critical first.
Do you see one or two initiatives on the fall town meeting coming out of any of these discussions?
We have, on the zoning areas, there's a whole series of areas. I mean, part of these, particularly on the zoning, I think, is just a matter of researching them and making sure that you've done your homework before you bring a change in the zoning. But there are a series of these. We're going to sit down with the ZBA. Many of these came from the ZBA itself, saying over a series of years, they've had tremendous headaches, dealing with, for the definition of building height, for example, as it shows up in the zoning ordinances. And I think Drew and Peter are intending to talk with them about which ones of these can we pick off very early, where, good clear thought based on 10 years of work and frustration could lead to a good clear piece. There are also others that we probably will want to look at. For example, solar panels. There are model zoning provisions out there, and Drew and Betsy have begun to take a look at them.
Good.
Some of those may be very simple. We want to do maybe basic things early, but I suspect many of these will want to take a close look at it. So short answer, probably a handful of things we can get at.
This is in very, very rough priority order. There's about 40 items in here, about 9 blocks. There's always going to be a trade-off between what's easy to do technically and then what's important, and then what's complicated in terms of stakeholders. That said, I think the drainage one jumped out. Drainage is one that's really just important because of the negative consequence of not addressing it. As you go down the list, there's a block in the middle of the buildings one where we're really hopeful the ZBA can pick some that are just technical definitions and get them cleared out. But I will tell you, not all of these require a 2/3 vote to pass, and not one of them is going to pass as easily as the overall just re-editing of the bylaw. So.
But then we have to prioritize it between the two boards to work with the ZBA to bring it to fall town meeting, I would assume, right?
We would work with, I think it's easiest if we work with them and jointly
Right, that's
sponsor
what I
with
meant.
the ZBA.
Yeah, okay.
There are lots of opportunities to make improvements here.
Yeah, I think we want to gain some traction with some easy, low-hanging fruit to start with.
Fruit, 80-20 rule, exactly. Just
Yeah,
take
the
it up.
last 20% will take 80% of the effort to deal with.
That's absolutely right, because what we have found is that as we were going through the master planning process, and getting to this draft, what we found that particularly in the housing and neighborhood sections, it's like where people tend to have complaints very, very, very often. A lot of that is right here in the definition section. So those are areas where, hopefully we can get a lot of bang for the buck, if you will, but we want to proceed very, very carefully so that we don't get into that law of unintended consequences.
We also want to conform with Winchester's history, which is, it seems to be about 50 years between doing anything. The zoning was put in the 1915, 1924 period. They didn't update it until the 1970s. We're just getting into it now. So either they did a very good job or they like to take their time. We'll sort of want to do the first.
So, one thing we might think of, not to intrude on your meeting, but in the off chance that more than two of us are interested in being there, we might post it so we don't run afoul of anybody.
I'd like to go to that.
Yeah, because I suspect you'll see several of us in the audience.
Okay, be more than welcome.
And,
More the merrier.
Thank you
There
very
is, I
much.
believe each of you have the The full copy of the master plan.
Yes, we do.
We do.
I mean, this, tonight begins sort of our official outreach to you, so you are cordially invited to read it through several times, pen up notes, ideas, additions, and changes, and feed them back to us, because we would like, when we sit down to have a public hearing on this in September, the planning board is required by law to adopt this after public hearings, and we'd like to make sure that it represents a set of strategic directions that deal with all the problems across the town. And our perspective is this piece. We need others as well. So, so read it early and write us.
This is phase one, just the full process. There's certain elements that are not included. They may interact with the first elements that you're seeing, and so we may do a revision of parts of this, in theory, within the next couple of years as we get the other parts going. And I think it's real important, Lance made the point, this is a master plan. This is not central control. It's dependent a lot on the private sector, depending upon how attractive, how well we do this and how well we can attract private capital to execute on the vision.
So I'll work with you, Lance, and the town manager to come to your meeting the next, in July. We'll pick a day in July if we're all in agreement.
It's not scheduled yet.
Okay.
We can.
We'll work in tandem. Tom, you want to close?
No, that's it. I really appreciate it. We're
Roger?
excited to be able to add some value if we can.
Okay.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for waiting. I
You
appreciate
may
it.
continue on as late as you like. With your permission, we'll leave and go home to bed now.
We will be
Call
there
you in
next
about
Monday.
10 minutes, all right? We know where you live, Lance. It's a very unusual meeting in the sense that the town was saddened last week with the passing of one of the great citizens in the town, Peter Van Aken. Many of us, if not the whole town who was in town, turned out to a very touching and terrific memorial service at the First Congressional Church for Peter, which just understated his brilliance and his commitment to the town. So I'm going to ask the selectmen and everybody and the viewing audience and in here to have a moment of silence in honor of Peter Van Aken. Thank you. One thing I'm going to try to do is I'll start, then ask Mel and go around the table to anybody, starting with Jimmy, that wants to speak about Peter. I went to the eulogy and the service for Peter. It was very touching. But I did read an article by Paul Andrews. I know that Peter Haley had an article in the Star, which was also good, but Paul's one sentence touched it for me, and to quote Paul, Peter was a brilliant mind combined with a love for the town of Winchester, which kind of summed it up for me, and I only regret I didn't know him better. I knew him as an equal, but on the personal side, I learned a lot about Peter on Saturday. Mel?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter, when I came to town as the town manager about 5 years ago, Peter was one of the first who greeted me and told me he was a former selectman and would help me and be a resource to me to learn how the town works. And I took him up on that opportunity many, many times. He was very helpful always to me, not only on the issues, but me personally, and I'll never forget that. Peter was always one who always understood every aspect of a problem, and there's many aspects of problems in the public sector at the local government level, but Peter understood every angle, and as a result of that, he was able to help foster compromise and solutions, and he was the best I've ever seen at it. I'm going to miss him a great deal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jimmy?
Peter was a nice guy, and that's the best way to describe him. He was caring. He was a good father to his children. I met him, my son and his son were the same age. He was a good husband. He was truly a civic leader, and not just in town government, or not just in every aspect of town government, but in his church. He was very involved with the Boy Scouts, and he was just what we would call a caring, connected person to everybody who knew him. Once you met Peter, you felt a connection there, and it just developed as time went on in a very good way, and he was an example.
Thank you, Jimmy. Roger?
Well, I was a friend of Peter's and recent years, and had respected him as a selectman and really got to know him when I was running for office, and he helped me and he counseled me, and he was a mentor, and really tried to take from Peter both love of Winchester, which I share with him, but also the trying to, when you disagree, not be totally disagreeable, and to try to find the common ground. And as Jimmy just said properly, he was able to do that time and again. One of the takeaways from the memorial service was the terrific story his daughter told that she found herself in a situation and she couldn't get hold of her dad, and the word she heard was, "What's the plan?" And that really, I could hear Peter saying that on more than one occasion, where you're talking about something and he'd bring it right back down to what is the plan. I think it was on one level very, very sad, but also totally appropriate that the last time I was with Peter, with all of you, he was sitting here at the Selectmen's table, and that was on a Monday night, and he passed away that night. And so literally to the end, he was working for Winchester. He was back at this table where the citizens had sent him and where he served so ably. So I miss him. I can't believe he's gone. And I, on behalf of Winchester, I just thank him for all he did. And we will all benefit from Peter Van Aken having lived in Winchester and served us all.
Thank you, Ron. Boris?
I would just say that from my own perspective, it caused a lot of reflection on my part, having just worked with Peter the night before till 11:30, brought home, a lot of things in terms of putting life in perspective. But I thought Peter could serve both as a professional, personal role model to me. I got a chance to know him throughout my campaign and other conversations, though brief. I would say that the achievements that he had in both his public service and his personal life are one from which, if I ever attain that sort of level of accomplishment, I would consider that a very successful life. I thought his qualities of integrity, preparation, understated manner, and intellect were the key things that I actually spoke to my family about post the memorial service to discuss with them about Peter and his virtues. And I would say he reminded me so much of my father-in-law, who too passed away way too young in life. So my sympathies to his family. And
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I think, all of us, who have been, doing things on behalf of the town and care about the town have our stories about Peter. And I think for me, one of the very first was that he was the person who called me, shortly after I moved to Winchester and suggested I run for town meeting. And I didn't really know too much about town meeting, but I had already heard about Peter Van Aken. And I thought if he thought it was a good idea, that probably it would be a good idea to do that. And then over the years after that, of course, there were many intersections with Peter. And I think, I think we all think about sort of what is important in life and what is important, let's say, in public life. And I believe this connects to one's private life as well. And we talk about leadership. And Peter really was, in the very best sense of the word, I think, a leader for the town. And I think in order to do that, you not only have to sort of have opinions about public issues, but you really need to be sort of close and be guided by your character and your values. And you need to know where those things are coming from. You need to be centered in that way, I think, to be a truly effective leader. And Peter really was that. He really was centered, as people have talked about the memorial service, or the funeral rather, to hear about his family and his friendships, his relationships with his children. I think it was very meaningful, I think, for all of us to to understand that about Peter, something that was totally consistent. There was no daylight in between those values and who we understood him to be and how he conducted himself in public. So I guess I would say, if I were just to say one other thing about him, one of the things I valued so much about him was that he really could listen. And I think if you can listen, there are a lot of other really good things that happen after that. You can be respectful of people, you can really take in all sides, you can sort of check your ego a little bit, and really try to come up with the best solution. If you don't listen, and it's not necessarily a real easy thing to do, it's pretty hard to come out in the right place. And that was something that I think Peter did very, very well. So I know all of us are going to miss him a great deal. But on the other hand, I would say there'll be many people in town who will kind of carry Peter around with them a little bit, and as we're in different situations, sort of think about him and try to figure out, well, what should the plan be? And I think Peter will still be offering us some guidance in that respect.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Out of respect for Peter, we're going to take a 2 or 3 minute break here, not to jump into the topic like nothing really happened, and just let everybody at home and in this audience reflect on it. So we're going to come back here in about 3 minutes, if everybody could reassemble, and we'll start the meeting then. Okay? Thank you.
Made possible by Sims Jewelers, serving Winchester for over 30 years. Currently offering the highest prices for your damaged, broken, or unwanted gold and diamond jewelry. Visit us at 550 Main Street or call 781-729-6741 for a confidential appointment. Coverage of Winchester Selectmen meetings are made possible by Sims Jewelers, serving Winchester for over 30 years. Currently offering the highest prices for your damaged, broken, or unwanted gold and diamond jewelry. Visit us at 550 Main Street or call 781-729-6741 for a confidential appointment.
Thank you for that, and thanks for all those kind words about Peter. It just doesn't do enough justice. But
Good evening.
now, Betsy,
Good evening. Good evening.
Betsy, we're going to try to do something a little acrobatic tonight.
Sure.
All right, and that is
Are we dressed appropriately?
I don't know.
we're going to talk about the tree gift fund. And then we're going to talk about a a grant opportunity by the Conservation Committee briefly, and then we're going to get back into the bicycle pathway
That's fine.
in that kind of order, if we
That's
could.
fine.
So.
We'll
if-
just call it musical chairs.
Right, exactly. So if both of you folks would like to talk about the idea about the tree gift fund, that would be great.
Yes, exactly. First of all, I just wanted to know that from what I had initially sent around, there was one item that I needed to talk with Mrs. Van Aken about, that I wasn't able to reach her until earlier today. And so there's just, I just redlined a couple of minor changes. Very minor.
So this top sheet goes away.
Yes. Should say that, and I just, redlined that, so you can see what changes there are. But before we get into the details of that, I've just got a little statement here.
All right, Betsy?
Peter Van Aken, besides serving on the planning board, we were also friends for over 20 years. So obviously, I was very touched by his loss. We are very fortunate in having had him with us for so long. He really was Winchester's man for all seasons. Winchester has lost a giant. His presence was felt across town in so very many different venues. Many people talk about making a difference with their lives, but few actually live it out. Peter Van Aken did. His contributions bettered not only town government, serving as selectman and on the planning board, the finance committee, and many other ad hoc committees, but also in his many church activities. His work with the local Boy Scout organization, as an Eagle Scout himself and recipient of Adult Scouting's highest honor, the Silver Beaver, made Scouting's fun and values an integral part of many Winchester families' lives. As an able businessman, he helped not only his customers, but utilized those same skills in many organizations. As a father and a friend, he was the person to talk to about every issue under the sun. We all knew that his perspective would provide a key link to organizing and presenting things in just the right way. He left every organization or group he was attached to better for his having been there, and in so doing has left a long, long legacy for his family and his friends, for the First Congregational Church, for the Temple Shir Tikva, and for the town of Winchester, which he served so ably for so many years. He was a complete person. He was a loving person, and he will be missed by all whose lives have been touched by his. Peter Van Aken has left great big shoes, and we can only try to fill them by continuing his work in that spirit. There is one thing that each of us can try to do to keep his legacy fresh and growing in this community that he loved. One of his last great projects was Winchester's Street Tree Program. The Peter Van Aken Permanent Tree Fund, which we hope you will be approving this evening, will be established, we hope. Contributions to this fund will result in the planting and care of street trees. Over the years, we hope that hundreds of Van Aken trees will be planted, forming a permanent living green legacy in the town of Winchester. Thank you.
Betsy, thank you very much. I'm not going to talk. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add that, from the having served with Peter on the street tree committee, I think it's a very fitting memorial to him. He certainly worked very hard and was very anxious to see that Winchester was a more beautiful place. And I think that's a very fitting memorial. And speaking for myself and also for the Conservation Commission, we strongly endorse the creation of this fund.
Do you need a motion on that, Mel?
We do, just so citizens of Winchester are aware, this will be established and then funded by contributions of citizens and friends of Peter Van Aken as a living memorial. I'm sure there will be many of us that will probably continue to contribute to the fund over the years. I discussed this with Mrs. Van Aken this morning, in fact. So it will be overseen by the trustees of commissioners of trust funds for the town, and funds will be dispersed by the head of DPW after consultation and approval by the Street Tree Committee.
Jimmy?
I've got a couple minor amendments I'd like to make this. Basically, you have on the fourth line for the planting and care of trees in Winchester.
That's correct.
Could we define care, either planting and maintenance or care and maintenance? I think it's important that we, include maintenance as part of this issue.
Yeah, well, maintenance was really what we had in mind. As you know, it's very, very important, particularly as young trees are planted,
I'm
that
gonna
that they be watered regularly.
Yeah, I'm going to make a friendly motion to that, so that people know that once we plant, we have an obligation to maintain them.
Sure. I have no objection to that.
Mel, could you explain to us what is the Winchester Tree Committee?
Well,
Town Street
I'll
Tree
leave that-
Committee. Do we have
I'll
one?
leave that to Mr. Whitehead, since
Yes,
he
we do.
is a
Be
member.
educated as well, but.
Since he is a
perhaps
member thereof.
may need
I know
to
this from the
formalize.
Cemetery Committee, last week, Mr. White had mentioned there is a tree committee, so why don't you?
Right, there's a street tree advisory committee, the function of which has been to assess the quality and number of street trees and where there are and where there are not street trees in the town, to then recommend, because town meeting approved the expenditure of money for the planting of street trees, of which $20,000 is expended this year and $10,000 next year.
Capital.
Of capital. And there again, and to Mr. Johnson's comment, one of the problems we had was that we had the money to buy the trees, but not necessarily the money to maintain them for their initial period of installation or growth, once an establishment. So the street tree committee went around, assessed all the trees in the various areas, identified species of trees to be planted, particularly low-growing species to be planted where there were wires overhead, looking particularly, prioritizing where they should be planted, particularly on the gateway streets. So you'll notice that we planted them, the trees that have been planted have been planted on the gateways into Winchester or primary cross arteries like Cross Street. So that that's what the Street Tree Committee has been doing. Fairly extensive evaluation. A spreadsheet's been developed of all the trees and where they're located on each of the towns and what kind of trees.
Okay, follow up? Sure. An advisory committee is appointed by who?
The town manager.
I haven't made any appointments to it since I've been here, but I have to do a little bit of research to find out,
Okay.
and we should probably
I know,
formalize whatever.
the Conservation Committee is.
The conservation, there are different bodies.
Okay.
Right.
appoint
No,
an
one of the
individual
things
to
we
it,
have
but-
in town is I don't want to give, I'd like to make I'd like to make a motion for this, but one of my concerns is Street Tree Committee. I would say either at with the Public Works approval of the Board of Selectmen of the town manager. Because it is just an advisory committee,
It is.
and
This is what this
can't
says,
make
I think, right?
recommendations.
In Winchester to be authorized by the head of the Department of Public Works after consultation, it says, and approval.
You see? The real thing is the street.
Jim, are you working with the DPW on this?
Oh,
or
yes,
no?
very much so. In fact, the DPW, Jay Gill is a member of the committee.
Right.
But an advisory committee cannot recommend and approve. They can only advise.
Okay, so.
I think our concern was, that there needs to be a balance between what money's spent on maintenance and what's money spent on new trees. Or maybe you wanted to spend all your money on maintenance one year and no new trees, depending upon the needs of the town, and that would be something that the Street Tree Committee would
I have no
advise.
problem, like I say, advisory committee can't do what you're saying.
Why don't we clarify it, because we got,
Suppose we
want
say,
to.
after consultation, and then we strike out and approval of, and just simply say, after consultation with the town street tree committee.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, and Mel, can you bring it back to us at the next
I
meeting?
do, yep, I will.
All right.
Just
Make a
some
motion?
All right.
Jim, you had inserted maintenance, so it
Maintenance.
would be planting,
It'd be
care,
for
and
planting,
maintenance.
care, and maintenance of street trees in Winchester.
Are you okay with that, Betsy?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Jim, you okay?
That's fine.
That was the
All right.
intent.
Could you make a
I'd like to
motion?
make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve the Peter Van Aken Permanent Tree Fund. The purpose of this fund will be to create contributions from citizens and other to oversee the for investment purposes by the Commissioner Trust Funds and the allocation of income in any amount, but no less than $500 for the planting, care, and maintenance of street trees in Winchester, authorized by Department of Public Works after consultation with the Street Tree Committee.
Here a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Betsy, I just want to let you know, I polled all the selectmen and the town manager, and by this time next week, you'll have 100% contribution from our group, and I'm sure after the word gets out, this fund will be quite sizable going
I
forward.
believe so. I think a lot of what has happened so far has been sort of, almost by word of mouth in many ways, and so we're
He's a
hopeful.
great guy.
We're hoping to be able to get more
And
publicity
thanks for
around
your,
this.
and thanks for your comments, Betsy.
And
Very
thank
nice.
you. Thank you
Just
very much.
before they,
Sure.
we go from the subject, contributions can be made to Town of Winchester, Peter Van Aken Permanent Tree Fund, and sent to the town manager's office at 71 Mount Vernon Street in Winchester. And, we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Yes.
And so, for those
Put
who
that on the
enjoy
website.
the town of Winchester on whatever level, it's a great way to show it. So Peter Van Aken, Permanent Tree Fund, care of the town manager's office. Thank you for bringing this forward. Really.
Thank you very
Bill?
much, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, well, first of all, I think is a fitting tribute and a great, as you say, living legacy to Peter. The town has received nearly $2,000 in contributions already, and that's just from the word of mouth, really. So after tonight, I'm sure, and then we will place the requisite information on the town's website, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more. What was interesting in going through these donations is the really heartfelt thoughts that were written in the notes that came with it, which was very emotional as
I
well.
hope we'll share those
Indeed, and
with
please, yes, if
Candy.
you could please share those with Mrs. Van Aken.
That'd be nice to put some
Much
anonymous
appreciated.
comments up. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No,
Don't
stay there,
leave,
Betsy,
don't
stay there,
leave.
don't go nowhere.
Part of the gymnastic
Part of the
portion
dance.
Okay,
that was-
okay.
Jim,
Okay,
could you
I'm sitting,
bring
I'm
one
sitting.
thing forward?
Well, just very, very quickly, Mark Toogood asked me to stand in his stead tonight, and just to request that the board authorize funding of a support that we're seeking from a consultant to assist us in preparing a proposal relative to the NACA grant opportunity. Just to refresh your memory, as a result of the ExxonMobil settlement relating to a spill that occurred in Chelsea Creek, an amount of $4.6 million has been set aside and allocated to the NACA, which is the North American Wildlife Conservation Act, administered by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And their maximum grant is $1 million. It requires a $1 million match. It's a one-for-one match. But that match can take the form of land put into conservation or other contributions in kind from the community, such as support from the DPW and is supporting the work. And after discussion with Wade and Mark, we've identified at least 3 different parcels that would qualify as potential match parcels. So, we are confident that any one of those parcels would represent more than the $1 million match. One is at Winning Farm. One is down related to conservation land that was acquired last year. There's a 2-year look back on this so that there is some opportunity to look back as well. And we've met with Mitch Hartley, who is the Fish and Wildlife man who's overseeing the receipt of these proposals last week. Walked up through Davidson Park with him, and he was more than complimentary. In fact, you saw me as I was leaving from that meeting. He was very complimentary of the park and on the proposal that we're proposing, and he suggested that if we do get the money in, the deadline is July 31st, which is why we're seeking this additional support to help us get it done in time. So the support we're requesting is from Mike Toohill, who I think is all known to you. And we have a proposal from him not for an amount not to exceed $6,000 to support this proposal. We think we have a real strong opportunity, particularly after our meeting last week, to capture this money if we can get our proposal in this year.
Jim, if you can help, Mel, do you know where that money could come
My understanding is the proposal was from the hospital gift fund.
Is everybody okay with that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize up to $6,000 be taken from the hospital selectmen's gift account for the purposes of authorizing Mike Toohill of Conoco Engineering to submit a proposal to prepare for a grant at Davison Park.
I hear a second? Second? Discussion? Roger?
I just want to thank Mr. Whitehead and the Conservation Committee and Elaine Vreeland for bringing this forward. This really ties across a whole bunch of issues that are out there that we're working on in these different silos we have around town, and it's terrific. And part of that $1 million match would be some of the funds that we have expended on flood control. And I know this board only recently heard from some people up around Davidson Park. We had a couple letters inquiring as to what could be done, and at that time, our only substantive response was to ask DPW to go out and look at undergrowth and cleaning up and whatever. This is a terrific opportunity, so I just want to, I'm going to support the motion, but I just want to thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Betsy, I
Still
see
can't
that we're going to talk about the bikeway, but I see Representative Lewis is in the audience. Jason, would you like to come forward since you're a proponent of the bikeway as well and sit in? Want to bring him up?
Sure. Jamie Fosberg, who is the chairman of the Greenway Committee, was not able to be here this evening. I'm actually the planning board rep. And Mr.
Welcome,
Olmsted.
Jason. And
And Mr. Olmsted has been working very closely with us both.
Jay, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Jay Olmsted on the Greenway Committee for the Winchester Greenway Committee.
Okay, and you live where?
I live on Mystic Valley Parkway.
Okay, good. And I think we all know Jason Lewis, our state representative. Well, Betsy, why don't you begin?
Well, let me see now. I wasn't sure exactly where you folks wanted to begin because we have work, and I brought the boards up too, so we of course want to talk about the bikeway itself and where we're progressing. There is a meeting on the tip that is going to be coming up, and we would very, very, very much appreciate your support on that project. It's going into the year 2010 funding. It's a forward funding process, so we wouldn't be starting construction for several years yet. But it's important to be able to maintain our place in line for that state. It's federally funded, but through the state, and so that's why it goes through the tip on that.
You want Jay to walk us through some? I saw you bought a flip chart here, Jay. Would you like to do that?
So I'll be very brief. One